My first novel, The Monsters of Templeton, is really very much about my hometown of Cooperstown, New York, which is this absolutely gorgeous 2,000 inhabitant little town in the middle of nowhere. We have an enormous 9.5 mile glacial lake and these beautiful rolling hills, and it's just this very antique, very Americana feeling little town. And growing up in a place like that is absolutely wonderful because you hear a lot of the legends that happen and a lot of the mythology and the myths that come from a town like that. And we're very lucky too because we have the Baseball Hall of Fame and a wonderful opera. And we have James Fenimore Cooper, who's one of the first American novelists. He was from there. His father created the town of Cooperstown. So I moved away, and I was living in California at the time, and I was feeling so nostalgic and homesick for my little town that I decided that after I had finished a novel that did not succeed on any level, that I would begin again and write about Cooperstown because it was something that meant so much to me. And I wanted to just spend 2 or 3 hours a day in my hometown. So I began by going back in time. I did a lot of historical research. I went through all of the old newspapers from the town called the Freeman's Journal. I read theses and all sorts of dissertations at the New York State Historical Association Library. And for me, I'm a fiction writer at heart. So you give me a fact, 3 days later, it'll turn into my own little story that has nothing to do with the fact. So I took this historical idea of Cooperstown and it just transformed into something completely different. The story is about Willie Upton. She's the scion of the town founder who created the town in the late 18th century. And she's 28 years old. She's an archaeology graduate student, and she's in Alaska when her life just implodes. And so she decides to do what we all do when our lives sort of fall apart. That time she goes home in order to lick her wounds. But her mom won't let her lick her wounds. Her mother, Vivian, is a former hippie, and she has turned into a Baptist convert. And she decides to tell Willie a secret. And the secret is that Willie, who had believed all of her life that she was from a love commune in San Francisco, and she didn't know who her father was, her mother tells her the truth, which is she's actually the daughter of a man in town. And so, but what Vi won't tell Willie who he is. Instead, she makes her work for the knowledge, and so Willie has to dig through generations of her family's history in order to come up with her father. And what this allows me to do is to speak in the voice of multiple descendants of the town and people who have lived in the town for centuries and give voice to the town of Cooperstown over the span of 200 years. I think of this book as a hybrid of a book. What I really wanted to do was to create the way that I had seen the town when I was growing up. And because James Fenimore Cooper was such a large part of the town, his characters became actual people in my imagination. And I was also an imaginative kid with very bad eyesight, so I saw ghosts everywhere, and I saw a monster. And so instead of putting it into one genre, I decided that I'd pull in all sorts of different things. And there is an element of historical fiction in here, but I'm not a historical fiction writer because I can't have any fidelity to facts. And there's an element of magical realism too, but it's more metaphorical for me than magical realism. And there's an element of, the contemporary real life story of a woman who's, discovering something about herself too. So I like to think of it as a hybrid genre as opposed to an actual other kind of book. And even though, there's a monster in the title, and there's a quote by Stephen King, it's not a horror story, which is what some people have been expecting when they pick up the book. And they've actually emailed me saying, what is this thing? I just don't understand. So it's a wild mix. There are multiple monsters in Monsters of Templeton, and some of them are the people who created the town, who over the centuries have lived there. Even my narrator, Willie Upton, in a way, is a monster of ego, especially when she first gets there. But the creator of the town himself is sort of a generative monster. And there is the monster in the lake, but that for me is more of a metaphor and more of a sort of almost a metaphysical idea of the town itself than a real physical creature, even though it is physical in the book. And what it represents to me, it represents dozens of things, and over time I've talked about them to all sorts of reading groups. But the major thing that it represents is the secret of the town itself. So when the day that the monster dies, the townspeople very briefly get to touch the monster and see it before hordes of the camera people come and the scientists descend upon the town and start dissecting the creature and trying to figure out what it is. And there's an element of secrecy in small towns too, that and Willie goes through and she tries to dig up a lot of the secrets of her hometown. So it represents the secrets of a small town. It represents a creative instinct.